Well, I'm excited today. We have another new Get to Know Your Wedding Pro interview. We have Kate Faoro Wright on, who I have seen post. We've, like we were saying before we recorded, have existed in the online space together for a long time. Have not had the fortune of working together yet, but obviously, weddings and everything coming back. Kate, how are you doing today? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Faoro Wright. I am the founder, lead planner, and creative director at Tapestry Event Company. I just returned from a week in Hawaii, so I'm feeling rested and energized for the off season. But when I am not traveling and vacationing for fun, I travel all over the Pacific Northwest and up and down the West Coast, and sometimes even a little bit inland to help people plan their mindful, outdoor-centric weddings and elopements.
So that's interesting. So that's, more specific, right? In terms of kind of
Sure.
what you guys, so I guess walk me through that a little bit. First off, the name Tapestry Event, and then, just like you said, just kind of having that focus that you have.
Totally. Yeah. So I come from a background of, I guess you could say, a combination of yoga studio management and leadership. So mindfulness is very much at the core of the work that I've done in my career. And then too, also drawing on my passion for nonprofit work and values-centered employment for myself, certainly, but also value-centered work that does good for human beings in the world. And so I think the origins of Tapestry really come from wanting to create a values-centered wedding experience that feels woven together or integrated with the way the couple already lives their lives and comports their lifestyles. That's very much so what our process is tailored towards. And then when it comes to kind of the outdoor piece or the outdoor element, we live in and love rather the Pacific Northwest. It's where I was born and raised and have chosen to live and set up my life. And many of the members of our team also to love it here. And a big draw, I think, for people, whether you are born and raised Pacific Northwest or whether you move out here later on in adult life, is the outdoor lifestyle has such a huge appeal. Like there's just a part of this place that resonates with people's souls. And I think when that chord is struck, you stick here. And so a lot of the couples that we work with, whether they're from here or they're recent transplants to the area, it's really important to them that they show their friends and family why they've chosen to live their lives here. And with such a big element of that being the outdoors, we try and integrate what they love about the Pacific Northwest region into the event itself.
It's interesting. You were talking about managing the yoga studio. I used to be a yogi before and then, with the business and things, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Do you still practice? Is that something that you incorporate into your life?
Absolutely. So I still practice yoga. I still teach one class right now a week up at the studio up north that I've taught at since the pandemic began, oddly enough. And I have been a certified yoga instructor since 2012 with no gaps in my teaching since then. So it's definitely a big part of my life. And then almost every member of the Tapestry team is either a yogi, a yoga teacher, or ascribes to some sort of regular like healing and intuitive practice.
And so do you feel as though, just being mindful and being present, right, is helpful in terms of, going to the wedding days, right, and dealing with maybe something that's not as peaceful, right? It's a little more active going on.
Yeah, one of the big things we emphasize for our clients is often when you're coming on board with us, you're someone who has those outside systems of support built into your life more often than not. So whether that's a strong community or network of family and friends you can lean on, people who help heal your head, like therapists, people who help heal your heart, hobbies, crafts. What we look for in the people we work with are people who are what we call supported elsewhere or supported outside of this working partnership. So then you can show up and be supported by us in this specific space of wedding planning and get the most, I think, from the mindfulness tools and exercises that we weave in.
It's something that I want to touch on, and especially when it comes to wedding planning, right, and that client relationship. I've talked a lot with my wife, kind of just as we're getting done with the season, right, and people are tired, and having different weddings, and where it still does seem, as much as we talk about this, it seems like it's important, but the connection between, right, the vendor and the client, right, more so even than like, how do the photos look, or how do the flowers look, or how does, DJ, whatever, it's, the personality, right, that you're going to have working with you, right? And obviously that starts at the top of the planner. What do you say to all of that? I mean, what I'm talking about, just in terms of like making sure that's right fit and all that. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as community builders, and I think there's the community that we build around our couple. There's also the community that we build within the larger kind of wedding industry between vendors. But when it comes to the community we're building around the couple, we put in a lot of time, effort, and energy in getting to know our clients before we ever introduce them to a potential vendor match. We spend a lot of time, in the application process to work with us and getting to know them and having consultations and having them do like pre-planning homework to establish their values, to set really clear and realistic budget expectations. So we try and do as much of that heavy lifting up front as we can to just flush all of it out. And then by the time we're making vendor recommendations and proposed matches, the couple's really clear about what a fit looks like for them and can enthusiastically opt into a conversation. And then we can enthusiastically recommend them to the very few, like the couple of vendors that are like that 95% match. And then it's just a matter of, choosing from that conversation who they felt most at home with. But I think a lot of our pre-work really helps us set up our clients to expect we're going to match you with 2 videographers. And these videographers are 95% of what you want. There are a couple of key differences. We're going to let you decide which ones weigh more heavily in your decision-making process, but we're not going to waste your time interviewing 10 different videographers and kind of like spinning you out into that space of dividing your energy and your attention in a lot of different directions. And so I think we as community builders, we take a lot of pride and responsibility for how that whole relationship looks.
It's just hard. And I don't know if it was this year with all the reschedules, and it felt like maybe vendors were already spoken for, right? Certain ones. And it seems like, you always have that question of like, okay, we want to work within our budget, right? But you can't just rely on that, right? I mean, you need to make sure. And so, because especially like when it comes to some photographers I've worked with lately in video, right? We exist past the wedding date where like we'll need to, whatever that fit is or not. And then ultimately there's going to be this product after. You're like, oh, I like that or I don't. And so it's, you want to make sure from the top down that, as we move hopefully into more open availabilities again, right? Where it's not 4 weddings a weekend or whatever, trying to fit in everything now that we can kind of establish, just making sure that it's the right fit, both in terms of like wallet and then in terms of personality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot that can be done in order to help build that relationship that people just didn't have time for necessarily in the last year consistently, right? It's getting to know people through time spent together. It's getting to know your clients by asking them to fill out questionnaires and then actually taking the time to sit down and read those questionnaires and consider how to integrate that information into the service or the product that you're rendering their way. I think the last 2 years have just been bananas in so many different ways at different times for different people. And we've all been out here doing our best, but I'm really excited to see the wedding community of vendors lean back into building their businesses in a way that gets to know their clients better and spends a bit more, I think the best way to put it is it's quality time for everyone building into the relationship. And for some, I think the energy still has not yet returned, and that's okay. I hope they take a restful off season this season and start to kind of regenerate some of that energy for themselves. But I think it's going to be a rebuilding process where we recognize the value of our time and we want to invest that value in higher quality relationships. And I'm excited to see where that leads in the next couple of years for the industry as a whole.
So how did you, going from, managing yoga spaces, right? And then, coming into what, talk me through, because it's always fascinating to me, different vendor types and then how people got into that, right? It all kind of dictates that path that we're on. So how did you get involved in wedding planning?
Yeah, so I got engaged in 2016, 2016. I got engaged in 2016. And at that time, I had graduated from grad school. I, had done my penance selling software for about a year and didn't love it, and moved into the space of yoga and started teaching more full time and eventually managing studios. And I was kind of in that space of managing a yoga studio when I got engaged, and planned my own wedding. Didn't even have a thought in my mind for hiring a wedding planner, which I look back and think is just kind of the most hilarious thing ever. Was supported by a really awesome group of vendors in my own journey. And I think I was really conscious of how easy they made things for me, and how fun they made things for me. It was just like a very magical experience. And I'm not the person who ever dreamed of my wedding day being magical or fairy tale like. So for me to use that word is kind of fun. And got most of the way through planning my own wedding. And I had a friend approach me who had recently graduated with her MBA. And she was really interested in getting involved in the industry. She had just been married and, kind of said, hey, I see your skill sets and I see how much fun you're having with this. Would you ever want to, get your start in the industry with me, and we can see where it goes. And that was my invitation in. It wasn't something that ever came out of my own brain, but it was one of those things that was like, yeah, that feels like a fun kind of natural extension, and with no pressure, we'll just see what happens. And about a year into that relationship, we decided we each had our own different vision that we wanted to fulfill on in the space, but we both really enjoyed the space. So amicably split as business partners, and I started Tapestry the next year and kind of took off into the future with it. And I think it was in 2019 where Tapestry was just so busy I couldn't manage the yoga studio anymore. The time trade-off was just asking for me to get pulled in another direction. And I looked at what I had built and decided, I don't think I can't not give this a shot. I'm just too curious to see where it'll go and what I can do next. And so I scaled back the yoga to teaching, which is the core of what I really love doing in that space, and amped up the time I spent behind my own business.
What'd you go to grad school for?
I got my master's of public administration, which is not a really commonly known degree. The way that I describe it to people is it is a business school for people who want to work in government or nonprofit or in social enterprises.
So what was your, I guess, game plan going into school?
Going into school, well, let me just say in the first grade, I thought I would be the first female president of the United States. So, and that still has not happened yet. We're an inch closer, but I think I've always had a real passion, even going through, middle and high school and being a student body representative all those years. I think I just had a real passion for working with people and hearing and listening for what it is that they need, and using my talents and skills to just advocate for them. And so going into grad school, I had my eyes set on either being like a project manager at a local nonprofit, or being some sort of, I think, contributing position to a social enterprise, or a member of the board on someone's corporate social responsibility division. So figuring out how to harness money from the private sector or from other donations and transform it into public good. Coming out of grad school, still had those ambitions. However, I shot straight from undergrad right into grad school, and everyone was like, "You're awesome, come back with 5 years of work experience." So that was reality. And I think the next closest thing I found to that kind of work was at the yoga studio, was connecting with people every single day and facilitating a transformational experience for them that left them and their world better off for the time and the energy and money they had spent inside the studio. And there's an ambitious 5-year plan for Tapestry in my mind to have a more formally established corporate giving program. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2023. I think there are lots of ways that I see for me to navigate that desire and that passion into the work that we do at Tapestry in a way that feels really values aligned. It's just refiguring out those puzzle pieces in a new environment.
So how does that's interesting. So with that mindset that when you approach your clients, right, and their days and kind of living with them, right, existing with them for a year, year and a half, however long, how do you incorporate that into that?
Yeah, so we start the entire planning relationship with values-based exercises. So it's us trying to get to know who the couple is in their day-to-day lives, what they value most, what their culture of family is like. We get really into the nitty-gritty. We almost treat them as if they were their own nonprofit organization, and we're trying to just like build the nonprofit business model of those two people. And then we create a plan for them to invest in their wedding or their event in a way that is aligned with their mission and their values as a couple. And so if someone is really passionate about the environment, we coach in how to create a carbon neutral event that focuses on sustainable waste models. And brings in vendors who, leave no trace and are aware of their impact on the planet, and try and reduce that, or try and come up with different transportation solutions. So that way we are minimizing the ecological footprint of their event. So I think there's ways to do it, but it starts with us getting to know them really intimately first. And then we build a methodology for them to make investments in their day that are aligned with their mission and their values.
That's interesting. So not like having a caterer dump out all the, whatever.
If we can help it, no.
Yeah, right.
And also, right, it's having a conversation with the caterer on what's a reasonable amount of over ordering that isn't gratuitous, yes. Right? Because that's one of our clients' values. So it shows up in big ways, but also in those small kind of conversational tacks that we take with our partnerships.
So you've brought up a lot: environment, carbon neutral, right? A lot of these things. So I mean, it seems like it's obviously very driving force, right, of a lot of the mindsets that you have. So where does that come from?
Oh man, that's such a good question, and I probably have a million ways I could answer it. But I think what I would say is that a wedding, in our eyes, is just a really big opportunity, and I think that opportunity is best leveraged with our clients when we allow them to see and be seen by their families. In the light of what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind as a couple? What are our values? Can we invite the people that we love and that are closest to us into that kind of culture and into those values, so that way we can continue to live life side by side, striding along on the same page? And I think our couples are very motivated by that. I think that they're excited that this is more than spending time picking out the perfect shade of terracotta for your napkin and fussing over what kind of garnish to put on your plate. We're super clear that we are not the wedding planners for those things. Certainly, we have an odd set of skills that really makes your day look beautiful, as evidenced by our portfolio and our website. We have those talents too, but that will not be the core of what our conversation is with you. And I think inviting people into a world of wedding planning that is less superficial and more deep and rich in values-based is something that people have been yearning for. We just put out the call and they've been responding.
It's interesting because weddings, it's so hard. You have so many kind of outside forces, cultural, sure. Right? Things that are, you're kind of expected to do or whatever. Your parents have stuff or, it's hard. And I remember a couple years ago, it just felt like we were at a point where it'd be like hour 7 or 8 in the wedding, right? Hey, do you guys want to go out and do this? No, we're done. Like, we don't want to do that. Just very like, it's like, well, but you've planned all this, right? Like, you've built, and I understand, like I said, that there's a lot of these forces that maybe cause you to plan certain things or not, but it is interesting. You certainly would hope that people would enjoy their own wedding, right? And a lot of the different things about it. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, there's kind of two sides to that that we talk about very head on with our clients. We're really honest because some wedding traditions have meaning, and if they have meaning, let's find a way to incorporate them into your day that is energy rich rather than energy poor. I think when people start to fall into the tract of doing things because they are prescribed by wedding tradition, or they are feeling the outside pressure from friends or family members to follow through on their expectations, I think that's when things become energy poor in the planning process. And if they're already energy poor in your planning process, they're going to be energy draining on your wedding day. And so we pass everything through a filter of, is this energy rich or energy poor for you, especially as we're timelining and making the decisions of how the day is spent. And we iterate that a lot with our clients as things get changed or added. We always want to check and make sure we're making energy rich description or decisions. And then two, we also try and resource our couples really well. I'm a big writer. I write tons and tons and tons of blogs, very much from this like heart space of reflection and decision making. And so we try and offer coaching both through blogs and also in our planning sessions with clients to help guide them to the best answer that's right for them, rather than leaning on models that they've seen before for their answers that just may not speak true to them. But it's a really tricky space to navigate, especially if there are financial contributors to the event, and those contributions come with expectations, implied or explicit. So we try and be really just like aware of those factors, and try to help our clients externalize what's going on as best as possible. So that way we can build a day that reflects the two of them best and feels like their home, not someone else's home.
It's hard. It's challenging. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm sure you've always had, family things and everything else, trying, really incorporate that. And we had Ray Van Winkle on, it feels like a million years ago now, one of the first podcasts, right?
He's the best.
And, because I was talking with Ray, and I think at that point he had officiated some 1,300 weddings, right? And I said, talk to me like, because there's all these things nowadays, weddings are so exorbitant, right? It's all this, excess money, waste and all these things. And I said, well, what do you think about all that? And he was saying, well, it's almost just the act of actually planning the wedding is more important even, right, than the wedding itself, is balancing a lot of these like, well, what's important to you? What's important to me? What do we believe religiously? What do we believe spiritually? What do we believe with all these different things? And the wedding itself is the byproduct of that, right? The experience.
Yes.
But I always thought and that's always stuck with me, as it really fascinating to look at that. And I think the last year or two has challenged a lot of people, and to figure out, right, like, well, what do we really care about, or what don't we care about? And then,
yeah,
alternatively, I think we've had a lot of like, we just need to get married and push it forward. So I think it's kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see, and I'm very much so, I started being informed by my own partnership, and have since found a large community of humans who seem to agree with me. But I think that the planning process is a huge opportunity to dig into what about your partnership enriches the two of you, and to dive even deeper. And we set up our planning meetings as such, right? We set up the expectation that you're showing up equitably for the planning process. It might not look like you're splitting every task 50-50, but the two of you are equally involved in this, because it's an incredible opportunity to work together on something that reflects the two of you, something that communicates about the two of you to your guests, should you choose to have guests. And also to a springboard for those deeper conversations that Ray pointed out. And I think that there are lots of deep, rich conversations that kind of hide behind some of the wedding planning decisions. And you can choose to dive into those or not, right? That's totally your choice. But we say, if you're going to spend a year and a half, 2 years being really mindful and intentional about planning your wedding, you may as well ask that next question that's hiding behind that step, right? And have that conversation and develop an even deeper, richer relationship. So I think it's an incredible opportunity to do so. But at the same time, I also recognize that people can have those conversations outside of the context of planning a wedding, and that work can happen in other areas or entrees in people's lives. And so the choice to put it in your wedding planning process, I think, is a very naturally aligned one, but certainly not the only opportunity to do deep work like that with your partner.
Yeah, it's a little easier though. Okay, well, we're working on this together than just like, well, we're going to actually like do some counseling, or we're actually going to do some, some self-reflection projects. Like, it's a little bit easier. Like, okay, we're planning, like, we're getting something out of this, so that, right, we're working towards this party we're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of efficiency. Unsurprising as being a wedding planner and managing 5,000 details per event, I'm a big fan of efficiency. And so when I look at something like this, I go, oh, what a lovely and efficient way to go deep with your partner inside of something you already want for yourself. But also, too, I work with plenty of couples who just rock and roll with a 2-person elopement, and we still get some deep, rich conversations out of that process. But I also know that they are likely using the extra time they have not planning a 100-person wedding to spend quality time with their partner, go on walks and have deep conversations, or do their own version of that work together.
When it comes to consulting, right, meeting new clients, having them come on board, I have to imagine that your onboarding process, right, is very different, right, than other planners in terms of the conversations. So then, when you're meeting with the couples, because it's the same with video, right? Like people have no idea, right? They're like, please explain this to me, like what is going on? And, I have to imagine with wedding planning. So, I mean, talk me through those conversations, like, if people have met with other planners and then they've decided to go with you, right, where they feel that connection. I mean, what is it that draws, you guys together versus them choosing someone else?
Yeah. I will say we've been through quite the evolution the last 5 years. Getting more and more specific and niche, even inside of our onboarding process. And, in the last couple of weeks, we actually changed our contact form on our website to an application process, simply because we have a lot of interest for people in working with us. I think they get bits and pieces of our messaging. They see the imagery on our website and they're like, yes, I like what this looks like. This is touching on a lot of things I know I like about myself, getting outdoors, connecting with my partner, intimacy. I think we do a good job of communicating that. But our approach to wedding planning is so specific, and we do ask for a lot of buy-in from our couples. We ask them to, do kind of like deep, soulful homework from time to time, and we ask them to reflect on their values. And so by not being a cookie cutter kind of like wedding planning entity, we ask for a lot up front, and we get to know people deeply quickly is the way that I put it. Is we are slow in the onboarding process because we think that slow means fast when it comes to being able to execute on the actual planning process together once you're on board. So we take our time, we go deep, we get rich. People come in having answered a lot of questions about who they are as a couple, what they want from their day, what about our values and our team resonates with them, whether they agree to our safety and inclusion policy. There's a lot wrapped up in there that we do to pre-qualify. And by the time we're having a consultation, I know probably 90% of what I need to know about their event to know if we're a fit for them. So then it's just kind of confirming and qualifying and getting to know if there is going to be a strong relationship of trust in order to have the conversations that we need to have together, and for those clients to be able to open up when things get sticky or tough, or an unexpected conversation happens, or a change of heart happens that may be hard to navigate through, right? We want to be able to be those people they lean on first and foremost to have those conversations. So our consultation has to kind of start from that super deep layer. And then we bring in a lot of that, again, values-based work once they're onboarded, to continue that conversation forward and to help navigate alongside them when tough stuff happens, because wedding planning does kick up a lot of dust, and we're here for it.
It's just hard. I've had, again, these conversations with my wife lately about, vendors being people too, right? And like you said, where it is kind of this two-way street, where I think, everyone gets into the business and they're like, why we just want to book weddings, right? Or like, we're just trying to get clients, right?
I just need X. I just need Y. Yeah.
But then the longer, like we've had some weddings lately where, I've heard, feedback about like other vendors and things, and trying to like talk with people, be like, well, no, like, these things are going on like outside of, right, like the actual, right, we can't just walk in and be like a 10 out of 10 every time, right? There's things going on, or we're managing reschedules and kind of all these things. And so it is important, I think, to establish kind of that two-way street. I don't know, more than it ever has been, just because of like everything we've dealt with the last 2 years and all the reschedules, and living with clients longer than we ever have, it feels like, in terms of, community, and even like into next year now, we've already had, And so I just think more than ever, just establishing like, I am a person too, right? This is a two-way street, and we need to make sure that we work together, sort of thing.
Yeah, super important. And my goal is that, especially at my company, every single one of our couples is a couple who gets and sees and prioritizes that. I think from my last 5 years of experience, one of the kind of strongest messages that's come through is the clients who recognize their vendors as people and hold a reasonable degree of space for them to be people. Those are the clients and the couples that get the most creativity from their vendors, because their vendors trust their clients to take care of them as much as their clients trust their vendors to take care of them. There's that reciprocity there that makes for just like a really lovely communicative relationship. People feel more comfortable communicating if and when changes need to get made, and that's a two-way street, right? A couple might have a last minute idea they're curious about, and if that trust and reciprocity isn't there, they might go, oh no, it's too much to ask, or we're past the deadline, or what have you. And same thing with a vendor. They may not feel that they have the space to ask to show up 15 minutes later because stuff is happening. So I think that reciprocity is super important. And I think what I've also observed in the past year, especially, that I didn't expect to learn, is that the couples who hold the most space for those kind of small tweaks and changes to happen that kind of need to happen in order for a group of humans to get together and work together well, the more fun the couple has had. I think it's when anyone, including the couple, but when anyone gets really attached to, everything strictly executed the way it's planned, there is suffering when that expectation isn't perfectly matched. And it's suffering because of attachment to the expectation, not because the actual thing that's happening may be bad or maybe having a real time negative impact. And that's something unsurprisingly, with the return of weddings when we're still grappling with a pandemic, I think that's where I've seen the most pain from couples, is when they stay attached to those original ideals and allow for no flexibility, and it's getting caught up on that stuff rather than just enjoying the way the day is flowing and allowing for that flexibility for the humans they've invited.
It's hard. I remember the summer that we were getting married, we got married in August and we had the wedding in June, and it was just like horrendous weather, just pouring rain and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it cleared up, like miraculously cleared up for the ceremony and then the sunset, beautiful, but kind of a lot of like the and I remember sitting there talking with the bride, and she's like, this is a disaster, right? And I'm like, well, no, it's fine. It's fine. But like in the back of my head, I'm like, man, if this was my wedding, I would be super pissed too. Like it's way easier said than done, like going with the flow, right? But it is something that, especially now with, you have a vision and then it's changed. And, we've had some couples that have rescheduled 4 times. And here we are in, it's an evening in October when it was supposed to be, Memorial Day outside somewhere. And you're like, well, this is, it's reality. It's just, it's something where I've always said, like, you're told, right, your whole life, like your wedding day is like, it's supposed to be whatever you want, right? It's your day. But then, the world happens and then you're like, oh darn, this is not exactly what I intended.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been interesting to observe, obviously I think a lot has been shaken up the last 2 years that has like really made some of those things tricky to navigate for people. It's no longer just, oh, you didn't get a tent and it's raining on your wedding day. So we have to rework things. Some of the knock-on impacts are big and complicated, and family and politics and all this stuff gets wound up into it. And so it's been a lot for couples to digest the last couple of years. What I've observed is interesting is the couples that I have had who have rolled not only to the next year, but 2 years and 3 years following is, some of them said, hey, we've hung on to this original vision that we've had. It feels really true to us. And as the years have gone on, life is changing, things are evolving. It actually feels untrue to them now to stick with this vision that they had original. There's like this increased tension for trying to hang on to that original thing rather than evolving with the needs and the times and having babies and moving houses and all of these other big milestones that have been happening for people. So it's been interesting to see how of course there's no right or wrong, black or white answer that applies to all here. It's all shades of gray, but it's been just really interesting to watch how the dynamics of decision making and how that impacts people's choices around their weddings have flexed as the circumstances change and you have these longer relationships with clients and you're trying to still give them the feeling that they want, which I think relatively remains the same, but help them understand it might look a little different than it did because you have different priorities now.
Well, I mean, we talked about that. I mean, ad nauseum last year. It felt like where, it's so easy to just flip the calendar, from, okay, 2020,
Sure.
we're moving to 2021, and you're like, that is a lot of life that is going to happen, like you said, in the next year, moving and job changes. I mean, I remember we had a couple that it was the first one of the, it was like right when everything, and they were one of our first couples that moved. And they're in Texas now, right? He's like, we don't even live. You're like, we're coming back up, and he's doing it. But I mean, they're already on. I mean, they're on 3 steps ahead in their lives now, right? And it's like, okay, well, now we got to backtrack and go back to Seattle, and then have this wedding. It's just a weird thing to go through, like you said, where children, all these different things happen in the meantime, but we're still holding on to that, whatever that was,
Yeah. I I laugh because I go through kind of like my Rolodex of couples that I've just really enjoyed working with, and how different all of their different journeys have been, and all the factors that are at play. And I think the thing I've been grappling with now, like current state as a planner with some of my clients, is the very real sense of fatigue that's set in. So perhaps their lives have changed, and perhaps their vision needs to change with it. But also, I think the feeling of starting and stopping over and over again is another factor that I am really starting to see take its toll on people who originally planned for 2020 and are now bumped out to 2022. Is whether or not a lot of extra work has happened in the meantime, or whether or not we've been on just like a full pause and stop because we made the call early. There's just a very real sense of fatigue for kind of picking up and putting back down this thing that in their heads and hearts they thought would be kind of already like a sewn up, beautifully put together chapter. And that's one of the things I'm helping coach my postponements through right now is, how are we listening to that fatigue, and what does it mean for you? And is there a way of mindfully reworking what you want? What do you want to hang on to? What are you willing to let go of? And, how does that play with the resources you have available now, 2 years later? You might be prioritizing remodels on your home or preparing a nursery with that money rather than investing it all in a wedding. And it's okay to flex this wedding sphere of your life to live in proportion to the way that you feel is most aligned with life here and now. But it's still like, even just saying it, but doing it is it's a heavy lift. It's a hard thing to do. It's hard to let go of old expectations like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dorothy and I would plan a different wedding today than we, I mean, clearly. And so then, it's like we're asking these couples, a lot of different metaphors you could use for that, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating, I mean, and Dorothy's a teacher and a lot of that stuff too, and kids and the development right now. And there's so many like byproducts of everything going on. Right. And obviously weddings is like a super niche, exorbitant, whatever thing of that. But it's just, to me, it's very interesting, all the, the extra waves and everything that's come because of kind of what we've been dealing with the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, I agree. And weddings are certainly niche. And are they the most important thing that's been going on in the pandemic? No. Arguably, no. But at the same time, I think what they represent for couples and for families lives very big inside of your own story. So while in like the larger ecosystem of the health and welfare of our planet, is it a big deal if a wedding is postponed or canceled? No, but to an individual life and the lives they touch, yeah, absolutely. That takes up a huge amount of emotional space and bandwidth, and rightfully so. It's just, it's been a ride, y'all.
So before we let you go, when you're not, navigating all of these decisions and everything else, obviously you were with your family traveling to Hawaii. What do you do to round out the time when you're not, wedding planning and running the business?
Ooh, such a good question. I am really focused on creating more work-life balance for myself. I think as many entrepreneurs will tell you at any stage in entrepreneurship. But right now, I think, especially in 2022 and beyond, I am really focused on creating, or rather like holding more free space and creative time for myself to just think and innovate, whether it's in the business sphere or otherwise. I love yoga. I would love to get back to taking studio classes when that feel safe inside of my season and with the variance going on. I've been getting into a lot of very tactile projects lately. So I started working with resin most recently. I have a wood slab out in my garage that I have ambitions to turn into some furniture, and doing some house projects around the house that I bought a little over 6 months ago. I love hiking. That's my like outdoor sport of preference. So love getting outdoors, and slowly getting into cooking vis-a-vis TikTok and becoming my husband's sous chef. So spending some more time in the kitchen in the off season. And then I think one of my favorite things to do in the summertime when I am not on site at weddings is going to festivals and music events with my friends and building camps and displays and backdrops and attending and dancing my little butt off till the sun comes up. It's so much fun.
Okay, this has been fun. Always happy to meet new vendors, especially planners in the area that I haven't had the honor of working with yet. So I really appreciate coming on, and like I said, I know we've existed kind of in the online space together for a while now, but it is good to get face to face ish, right, and to kind of have a conversation. I think it's been very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I am so stoked to have this long extended form for a conversation with you. It's been really great. And I love what you're doing with this podcast. So just thank you for having me along for this. And I will keep tuning in for all the future guests that you have, getting to know my community better.
If people want to find out more about you, and I do think, your unique process to wedding planning and working with your couples, where would you have them check out?
Yeah, a great source for kind of like that deep, rich work. I would say go to our website. We have a really extensive blog, so www.tapestryeventco.com. We have tons of free resources on there, lots of inspiration, more and more getting posted all the time. And if you're more of a visual learner, Instagram, as always, is a great spot. You can find us at Tapestry Event Co. And in both those spaces, if you want to sign up for a free newsletter or other ways to stay in contact with us, we make those real obvious and available.
And I guess we need to be on the lookout for, TikTok cooking videos too here coming up, right? That could be, that could be the next foray, right?
We'll see. My marketing director has encouraged me to be a content consumer on TikTok for a while before becoming a content producer. And I think that's probably wise from a time management perspective, but who knows? If you find me, we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, Kate, this has been fun. If you're like Kate and you're interested in coming on the podcast, bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. It's a nice, easy questionnaire that we have. And until next time, I appreciate you stopping by.
Awesome. Thanks so much.